So first up, we have Melissa Shepard. I'm going to let her share all of her amazing accomplishments. I don't even think this slide fit all of them, but she's amazing. She's 30 times certified Golden Hoodie. And we're so thankful to have her here today to help us kick off the Los Angeles Architect Group. And sorry, let me just let someone in the way here. And so I'll pass it to you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me to help you kick this group off. This is really exciting and I love seeing all the people join. So it just goes to show how our worlds are coming together. We get the Golden Hoodies and we get the architects, and it's so much fun when these two groups can come together. So I also see a lot of faces from Dreaming in Color. So that is really exciting. All of you on here that were there. Nadina and I were there speaking, trying to inspire people to start looking at the architect path. And so I'm going to speak a little bit more on that today and how I got into the path and give my view on what I think an architect is and how you can start building architect skills. So I am a CTA. That's that, you see the architect pyramid, you get the application architect, system architect, and then you get CTA at the top. So I've completed that. I've also done the B2B and the B2C solution architect exams. I've got 30 Salesforce certifications, working on a few more. I got to get those done. Been procrastinating. Got my Golden Hoodie at the first ever architect keynote at Dreamforce 21. I'm also a Trailblazer and MuleSoft mentor. I've been in technology and software development for 22 years. 17 years in Salesforce, and this is not a prerequisite for being an architect. So just put that aside. That's just my path, and it has, it doesn't have to be yours. I am the founder and CEO of Liz Tech Consulting, also founder of Scale Up Arcs, which is an initiative to help underserved and underrepresented become architects, like understand what an architect is and gain the knowledge of an architect, and even gain knowledge that someone would want to gain as a CTA. And then if they choose to go for CTA, help coach them through that. Also lead the Boston Architect User Group, and also I'm the founder and admin of the Architect Ohana Slack. So if you're interested in that, you can find the invite link on my LinkedIn. So, so my path, I had a really traditional background. I went to school for computer science and mathematics. I graduated college and then got a job as a software engineer. And I actually was building an in-house CRM at the time. So it was interesting. My CRM experience goes all the way back to when I first graduated from college. I then did a couple of years of software engineering in Java, and then decided that I wanted to go to grad school. So I went back to school for my MBA with a focus in information systems. So it was cool because I started learning about CRMs and ERPs and integration and disparate systems and stuff that you would learn more in IT as opposed to software engineering. So I thought it was all really cool. And then somehow I ended up getting into .NET, and then somehow I ended up in a role in IT where I was working on the ERP system. I was customizing it in .NET, and then also I was given Salesforce. So this was 2005, 2006, way back then, early on. And I thought it was really cool the way you could just customize Salesforce so easily. And then I was integrating with it through the SOAP API. That's the only API that existed then. So I just found it really easy to work with. The API was easy. It was really just a cool system. And so I ended up sticking with it and going to an integration middleware company where I was working with Salesforce customers and working on the software and working on the Salesforce adapter, the connector for the software. And then from there, I decided to go independent. So that was around 2010, I believe. So I just started doing a lot of independent consulting, and I got into more development with Salesforce then because the Force.com platform came out. We had, Visual Force, and we did back in the day, it was just S Control. So there's a little bit more you could do with the platform when it came to customizations. And then around 2016, I decided I had my company so that I could work as an independent contractor. And then I decided to actually become a Salesforce partner in 2016. So to do that, I needed to get a certification. So I decided I was going to do Platform Dev 1. So went for that. And then started thinking, I really want to go down the architect path because I had a lot of exposure to architecture stuff like integration architecture as I was doing early on. And it just was something that really interested me. So in 2018, I ended up doing the architect pyramid. So working on the application and system architect certifications. And then once I finished that, I was ready to go for CTA. Well, not ready, but I was like, okay, now I'm going to go for CTA. So I did the CTA 601, which is kind of like an intro to CTA. So I suggest anyone that gets their prereqs done, go to that course offered by Salesforce, because it really gives you a good idea of what the exam is about and what would be expected of you. Because I think a lot of people walk into the CTA, they don't really understand what is expected. So that makes it really hard to pass. And that's something I try to do, is help people understand the exam and what it's actually testing so that you can actually prepare properly so you can pass. So did the 601 in 2019. Then I met Jama Lazard, who founded Ladies Be Architects. She's a really good friend of mine now. We started really studying together back then. She was going for her review board, and there was a couple other people that were going at the same time as well. I think it was Matt Morris, and maybe it was Charlie Prinsloo. So we had like this little study group going, and they all went to the board, and no one passed. And I was like, wow, this is not going to be easy. So I kind of walked away for a little over a year because I think I was a little bit, I don't know. I was just a little bit terrified of it, I guess I would say. I just knew it was going to be a much larger undertaking than what I thought, because I saw them presenting and thought they were doing great and they should pass. And so anyway, so it wasn't until August 2020 when I decided, okay, I'm going to go back on this CTA path, and sent an email to Salesforce saying I'm ready to get a date now for my review board. This is back before when they would just give you a date. And so I ended up getting one for November 2020, which was a little bit soon because I was not preparing or studying at all at this point. So, and I just went with it. So I decided to join Flow Republic, which is a CTA coaching program out there by Seb Wagner. So join Flow Republic. And it's really like a 6-month program. And I was trying to do it in like 2 to 3 months along with a couple other people. And it was really a lot of work. So I almost postponed, but I was talked out of it. And so I didn't. And hold on a second, I get some water. Almost postponed at that point, but I was talked out of it because my coach felt that I could potentially pass or get a partial pass and not have to do the whole thing over again. So decided to go for it. At the end, my preparation didn't follow the plan that I had laid out for myself. I just was feeling really stressed and just really, it was just tough. So I decided to go for it, and it really wasn't a bad experience. I mean, yeah, it was definitely, it's a stressful thing, but I decided to do it, and then I ended up not passing whatsoever. I didn't even get a partial pass, nothing. And that for me was kind of devastating because I was just so afraid of going into this exam and not passing. And that's what happened. So I actually got really upset. I kind of hit a bottom with it for like a day. I was just really upset, ready to leave Salesforce, ready to just like leave the whole CTA path and have nothing to do with any of it. That's really how distraught I was. And I ended up talking to a friend who had just gotten CTA right before me. And we had a long conversation, and he really talked me off the ledge. He said, listen, you need to do this. Like, we need you to do this. Like, he just was telling me, you can't quit, you got to do this. So I'm like, all right. He told me what he did and how his group went about preparing. And I was like, all right, this is going to take more work than I thought it was going to take. And I really need to have a study group, and I need to have study buddies. And so I decided to put together a study group. So I put out on the architect boards, the Ladies Be Architects, the Salesforce Architect Chatter group, that I had the study group going. I also knew some people in Flow Republic that had to study for some retakes. And I also tapped into the 111 group that Charlie Guo was leading. And we all just kind of started working together and just communicating over Slack. And I set up all these study sessions 4 times a week. So we were meeting 4 times a week starting in January 2020. And I think it was around February one of the people that had joined the group went to the review board and ended up passing. And we were like, wow, okay, so this really is possible. So, and we really just enjoyed working together and studying together. So this is the story of how the Architect Ohana Slack started. So it was just a smaller group of people, maybe like 20 to 30 of us, just all like studying together and preparing for review boards. And everyone started going to the boards, and one after the other started passing. And everyone's like, this group has really helped me. I don't think I could have passed without this group. So we were seeing that something special was going on. And we had people from Salesforce, we had people from IBM, we had people from Accenture, we had people from PwC, we had people from all the big partners just studying together in this little community and passing the board, which is one of the hardest exams out there. So it was just really exciting to see this. And it came to the point where I was like, wow, I don't even think I really want to go for the board anymore. I'm just really enjoying watching everyone else pass and seeing them become successful. So, but everyone's like, no, you can't do that. So I didn't, obviously. So it was around May of 2020. I said, okay, I'm ready to get back in this again myself and start preparing. So I actually put together a really small study group of 5 people within my larger group. And that's kind of how it was going. There was these smaller clusters of people studying together within the bigger group, because you can get so much more out of it that way. And we all had attempted the board before. And I said, listen, we're going to all study together until we pass this exam. And so we started studying every day of the week from like 7 to 9 p.m. from like May until September. So we didn't really have much of a summer because we were also doing our practice mocks on the weekends on top of this. And also I was running a 2-hour Saturday study session for the larger group. And also Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we had 1-hour sessions. So we had this larger study group 4 times a week. Then we met 5 days a week at night. And then we were doing our mocks on the weekend. So we put in a lot of time into our preparation for this. And so in September, the first 2 went to the board, 1 fully passed, and 1 actually got a 1-section retake, which is pretty successful for the review board. So we were excited about that. And then October, I ended up going to the board. But actually September, I brought in another girl that I knew, because since 1 person in our group passed, I said, come study with us. I want to help you pass as well. So she came and started studying with us for the last couple months. I went in October, I ended up passing. November came around, and then 2 more went to the board that ended up passing. And then 1 other person got a 2-section retake. So the 2 people that didn't fully pass, they ended up going back and then doing their sections and passing. So we ended up getting 6 people to pass the exam. And so it showed to me that if you really have the right information and the right structure available to you, you can do something such as pass the CTA review board. I'm not going to make it sound like it's easy, because it's not, but it takes work. But if you understand it, it's going to help you pass the board. So that's my journey. And there's some other amazing journeys out there that are completely different than mine. So another person who was in my group is Lil Van Biesen. And she came into Salesforce, I think in 2017, really no experience, and was just like, I'm going to go for the CTA. And like a year later was already passing, or a year or 2 later was passing all her exams. And then not long after that was studying for CTA. And then I think it only took her a few years to get it. So she's got a very inspiring story of someone that's gone from, just very new in the ecosystem to getting CTA in a short period of time. And I like our different stories because it shows you that it's really possible. But the reason why I share mine is because it shows that also community is so important for doing something as tough as the CTA review board. And with the right people and the right group and the right information, and with the right access to information, it's something you can actually do. So from watching this group grow and thrive, I realized if we just make the architect knowledge more accessible, that we can have a lot more architects out there, because we need them. And it's coming from Salesforce that we need more architects. And I completely agree with that. And I think it's really important to get architect education out there for people. So that's kind of like what my presentation is at Forcelandia. It's like an Architect 101. I give a whole bunch of different things that you can work on to build your architect skills in your everyday job, things you can look at or try to do or practice. So, so that comes to what is an architect. So that is one of those things that is a very gray area out in the ecosystem. I see architect job descriptions that are basically like advanced admin. I see ones that are like senior lead developers. And I'm like, that's not an architect. They might want them to have architect skills, but that's not what an architect is doing. They're not sitting there configuring, they're not sitting there writing code. And someone mentioned that they heard you don't have to be a developer to be an architect, and you don't. You do not need to have a development background to be CTA. I actually had to learn a lot of admin and BA skills to pass my CTA. I teach people process mapping because that was the thing that helped me the most going through my CTA scenarios and doing my mocks. And then just doing a lot of playing around in an org and learning some of the things that an admin would already know. So you definitely don't need to be a developer. So an architect really, if you think about an architect for a building, what are they doing? They're creating a blueprint, right? So they're taking all their knowledge on how a building should be constructed. And it involves technical knowledge, it involves design, it involves some of the softer things as like how maybe a building might be more accessible to the people going in it and how it might be more pleasant to the eye. They're thinking about all these things when they put together this design, and they're also taking into consideration the budget for the project, and they're also taking into consideration the timeline. And so they're taking all these inputs in order to create this design that is right for that project that they are trying to get a team to execute. So if you think about it, that's exactly what a Salesforce architect is doing. So maybe there's an architect that is designing small buildings. Maybe there's an architect that's designing large buildings like apartment complexes. So there's all kinds of different architects, right? So same with the Salesforce ecosystem. There are architects that are just focused on the Salesforce platform. There are architects that are more the solution architects that are dealing with the multi-cloud solutions within the Salesforce platform. And then you have CTA, which it's not just the Salesforce platform, but Salesforce is at the center of the universe for a CTA, but they're also dealing with all the other systems within the enterprise. So a CTA would have to understand things like an ERP and what does an ERP do and what kind of data does it hold. They have to understand other cloud-based systems, things like Heroku or AWS. They have to understand security, identity, and all kinds of things that come into play when you deal with enterprise architecture. So I really like this way of thinking about an architect as in the same kind of architect that's designing the blueprint for a building. So they're the ones taking into consideration, how can we build this with the lowest amount of risk, the highest probability of success, hitting our project timeline, staying within budget, not going over the project cost. And those are the things that the architect is really thinking about. And they come up with a design, and then they hand it off to the team or the people who are going to build the building that are actually going to go get the materials and go get the nails and the hammers and whatever they need to get this building built. But the architect's not doing that, but they might oversee it to make sure that the right decisions are being made along the way, because there's a process that needs to be followed in order for this building to actually be built properly, right? So that's where the governance side comes in with an architect. So or things like DevOps and governance, you make sure the processes are there for the people to follow the plan according to how the architect envisioned it. So that's my whole thing about the big picture of what I think an architect is and how I see it. And this architect role has just kind of evolved out there to be something that I don't always think it is staying true to what it should be. I think there's a lot of roles out there where they need to call an architect skills, but that's not what the architect is doing. So if you think about it in Salesforce, the architect's going to be doing things more like processes and road mapping and thinking about how the users are going to use the system and how they can bring in the right things to drive user adoption and make sure the system is being used properly. If the users actually want to log in and use it, because if they're logging in and they're not even logging in and they're not using it, or they're not using the customizations or using the system the way it's intended to be used, then the design is really just it's worthless. So when the architects is really taking into consideration all these different things and putting together a successful plan. So within that, there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be gained. So like for the CTA, it's not just getting tested on your technical knowledge. I think that's another thing that is kind of misunderstood. You're not getting tested specifically on technical knowledge, but you have to have that technical knowledge and show that you do have it, but show that you have a higher understanding of how to use that technical knowledge to come up with an optimal solution that is going to drive success for a project. Because ultimately, the architect is responsible for that project to be successful, because they're creating the foundation, they're creating the blueprint for the entire project to follow. So I guess that's really, I think I'm probably out of time now, because we have Taylor coming up as well. So do you want to take it back, Rachel?
Sure, Melissa. I know you're only going to be able to be here for about another half hour.
Yeah, maybe a little longer. So I'd like to do some, I think I can stick around until, just like 4:50, 4:55. So.
Okay. Do you want Taylor to go and then you both do the Q&A, or do you want?
Sure. Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Is that fine, Taylor? So it's going to leave you enough time? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yep. I'll pass it to Taylor.
That was awesome, Melissa. I loved the comment that you made about building a house, because that is one of the ways that I like to think about architecture as well. Definitely a good image.
Do we need Taylor's slide up here?
Apologies, Taylor.
Hi. Okay, I'm super excited. I've gotten some certifications since. Coming up second after a 30+ certified all-star CTA. I was like, oh, I should go grab some certifications. So I am really happy to say that I have 14 certifications now in the Salesforce ecosystem. I work with the architect success team at Salesforce. I specifically help with the B2B centric solutions. So I have a background in consulting. My very first job actually was being an intern. So I was an unpaid intern. I was in college. It was after the last economic recession, and everyone was losing their minds. Very similar to what we're seeing happen now. But one thing that was amazing was Salesforce was always growing. And I think that we are seeing that same growth continue. And so I'm just grateful for the ecosystem and the jobs that I've been able to ride along with since joining. I've worked with a lot of different sectors. So I am from the Midwest. So Nebraska is interestingly positioned, where we've got a lot of insurance companies. We've got a lot of financial services companies. We also have the Union Pacific Railroad, which is a federal railroad all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. So how all the things get from point A to point B. There's a lot of activity that flows with transportation and logistics out of the Omaha area. So starting a long time ago, I attended user groups in the Omaha area and got to sit along the mindshare of PayPal and eBay and just learn from some really great companies while also working in offices like Travelex Insurance and Currency Exchange, watching them use Salesforce for the first time and take part in their marketing department and the transformations happening there with a call center, and also working with Werner Enterprises, who was similarly doing a global implementation for sales account executives. And just seeing everything from the back end, I was so excited to actually do it myself. So that's sort of what started my love affair with the cloud, was seeing all these very big companies start to take advantage of newer and leaner softwares. And coming early on from college, I was a bit like, wow, like look at these systems that you're coming from and moving to. And I thought Salesforce was so much faster. I worked all sorts of different jobs, and I think the younger you are, the more spoiled you are with really fast internet and really good experiences, all the latest tech gadgets. So I always thought Salesforce created the best experiences for end users and for people who worked in those positions. So it was really fun seeing all of those different companies at different scales and sizes. Just the excitement of seeing folks become super users and love the platform. It was very contagious at the time. So that moved me into a consulting track from there, where I worked with marketing and sales cloud implementations. And as I got a little bit more advanced, moved on into service cloud, worked with a boutique consultant firm that was recently acquired. It's now called Rafter One, which is pretty cool to see that transformation occur for Gear CRM, where I was at previously. And so now that I'm at Salesforce, we've launched a certification. Since I've been here, the B2B and the B2C solution architect personas were announced, as well as the credentials and career paths on Trailhead. And so I got to tag along and watch those get launched and see how the entire ecosystem gets enabled when a change is announced. And now I help craft and curate some of the content. I work with a lot of partner channels, and so consulting is near and dear to my heart. So I'm super lucky that not only being involved with Trailblazer community groups and some of the affinity equality outlets, I've been able to work with you. Some of the folks that are on the call today have kindly joined workshops and think tanks providing feedback. And I just thank you so much, everyone that has participated or shared or helped write or review questions, because it truly takes a village. Nothing that Salesforce puts out is the mind share of one person. It is innovation from everyone. Everyone's feedback matters. So thank you, Rachel, for having me today. I do have a few notes. I took a couple notes while we were doing intros, and I just wanted to read those back 1 second.
While you're doing that, Taylor, apologies, everyone. It's come to my attention that you cannot message anyone but me. So I apologize for that. So just feel free to send me the questions and I'll be sure to post them out to everyone. I will fix that for the next meeting. Bear with me, it's my first meeting. So, but I do have a couple that I put in the window for from Marlene and Brian whenever you two are ready for Q&A, Taylor. Do you want to put things in the chat and you want me to share it out, or what's easiest for you?
I think putting it in the chat is great.
Okay.
That's super helpful. So one thing that I had heard is, what makes a Salesforce architect? And, there's a lot of confusion, and I think that is understandable and on purpose. So one of the things that I enjoyed was actually taking some of the new credentials for some of the newer roles. So we've got strategy designers, UX designers, we have the business analyst persona. And I think of all of these things as, Salesforce likes to call them jobs. And depending on the size and the scale of the organization, some jobs, as the phrase goes, is you wear multiple hats. And what I have seen, especially going from an intern to a super user training advocate, working in consulting and being a specialist for one single cloud or one single set of solutions, all the way to an architect level, is knowing how each person has a role to do, and what those jobs entail is what allows you to be a really good architect. I think that it's sort of like a Venn diagram where you're looking at a concentration of time And when you lean for an architect perspective, it may be a specialty architect that knows a set of core solutions. So having a definition or a delineator of a B2B versus a B2C architect originally caused a little bit of confusion. And coming in from the outside, I was confused because I'd always worked with both B2C and B2B data models. So I was interested to know, well, what is the difference and why is there a difference? And once I saw the tech stacks and the things involved, it made a lot of sense why Salesforce announced that delineation. And it was really to support our very large scale customers. So B2C commerce and marketing cloud in particular are not on the force.com or the Lightning platform of the Salesforce Customer 360. It's on an entirely different tech stack. So if you're a technical architect, an enterprise architect, or you're like Melissa and you're a CTA, you're very well aware of those things. And that's, sort of part of what makes their role so important as leaders of that area. But because it's a different tech stack, all of the considerations and all of the solution patterns and integration flows and the most seamless way to design a solution that's scalable and trustworthy, it's really completely different. So those skills, it's good to know that you're with a trusted architect that is familiar with that product mix or the needs and concerns of a high scale B2C customer. So the B2B solutions, their B2B tends to have a lot less data volume, and they also tend to have similar patterns with ERPs and external systems. And so that was really a core reason was we wanted our customers to have a way to quantify that they were working with an architect that was knowledgeable about problems that they were trying to solve. So this is an additional way to build up towards that CTA path. And so I think Melissa, she would agree with me on that, is that there's a lot of folks that have already taken the CTA and came back and generously helped us write these exams. And they're coming back to us and sharing some of the use cases and patterns that they've discussed while working towards their CTA. So this is another way to specialize. It's another way to set yourself apart of the ecosystem talent. And also importantly, not everyone wants to become a CTA. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge cost. And so for folks that are, they're always learning and they're always working, but they're not necessarily interested in going all the way up the CTA route, this is an excellent way to build out your resume and your skill set and to show customers that you've committed to a core set of capabilities.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. And I'm so glad you mentioned that about not everybody wanting to be CTA. I personally feel a lot of pressure within this community sometimes, especially as a woman,
Right.
because there's so few, that we should all want that, and not all of us do. And I worry I'm lazy. But,
no, not at all.
I think it should be okay if you know that you don't want that. It needs to be okay that you don't, and you find another way to find your place and take up space within this community.
Absolutely.
I made you co-host also, Taylor. So if you had anything you want to share in chat, you should be able to everyone.
Yeah. And one thing that I also wanted to call out is what I've seen both from working on projects in the field and looking at some of our roles and delegations is I see a solutions architect. So that's the Salesforce solutions architect. I see that type of persona as someone who's qualified and capable of being a quarterback for overseeing the project milestones. So you understand the phasology, which is part art and science. You can help recommend and also call out what order of execution you should tackle a large objective. So a lot of the times you get an order the size of an elephant and you need to break that down. And I see the Salesforce solutions architect, whether you're B2B, B2C, or you're just targeting that general area, that you're somebody that knows the right order to go about a successful implementation based off of the business and IT and industry variables. So sometimes there's timeline considerations. I've worked with different industries that I know we've got some folks in nonprofit. You definitely wouldn't want to be implementing a major change right before a certain period of time of the year if you're getting most of your donations during that time. And so just knowing how to help support, those migration strategies, go live strategies. You don't necessarily have to be hands-on, but you should be both a coach to the delivery team and overseeing, sort of that assembly of user stories. And I saw question patterns that I was like, oh, I want to bring this up on the call today. Is a lot of these certification exams talk about when to recommend app exchange. When I see designer or architect credentials, I see that as knowing when to call the boundary line of like above the line and below the line of this type of resource. Maybe you're aware of something, but it's not your role. So as much as, we want to know all of the things, it's also extremely important to know what your role on the project is and when you should use a delegated resource, such as an enterprise architect or a certified technical architect or a technical architect or an integrations architect. If you have a specialist and you're asked for a consideration, even though you may know the right answer on a large scale project, it's equally as important to know when to recommend specific stakeholder conversations and who should be directing certain conversations. So that's sort of that business leadership area. And before there wasn't a lot of guidance there. So I think that having these types of certifications about these role areas is really helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Taylor. That's really helpful too, to know the difference between knowing your role and knowing when to call on certain tools.
Right.
So important. Were there any resources you wanted to share in the chat?
Yeah, I will pop those in. And if we want to move into like an open Q&A, I think that would be great too.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Melissa, before I stop recording?
I just completely agree with everything Taylor just said. And that's actually what you have to learn to do for the review board, is understand when to call on the subject matter experts like data architects and integration architects and TAs and developers, and understand what their role is and why you would need one and what their job function would be, and bring in the right tools and the right process, and just making sure that the delivery team is following the right order of things, and determining if something should be in an MVP or a phase 1 or a phase 2. It's all of that. It's just, yeah, it's more the strategic advisor role in being the advocate for the business. I always say advocate for the business, but ambassador for the platform. And so you bring those two things together.
It reminds me of something Shobi said once about, don't be the hero, because what happens to the hero? The hero dies. So you don't want to be the hero. There's no glory in doing it all or sacrificing, to own or gatekeep a large delivery. It's really about working as a large strategic team and partnering with Salesforce, partnering with the SI app exchange area and the customer stakeholders. It's
right.
It's a lot of different angles of relationships.
And then understanding how to make sure those relationships are successful, so that the project is as successful as possible, to eliminate the risks. So you have to understand what the potential risks would be and how to mitigate those. So risk mitigation and
right,
really ensuring success. It really is.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Was there anything else before I stop recording? And then there's a couple questions for you both in the chat. Okay, I'm going to end recording and then we can.
Ooh, established orgs.